Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share our podcast on all of your podcast listening platforms. And check out our podcast on our brand new YouTube channel. So we changed our YouTube channel from the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast to the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. So now we will be offering you, we'll be having multiple podcasts on the channel, including our sister podcast, which is the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with E. James. Of course, on that podcast, I have discussions with dads and daughters talking about the daddy-daughter relationship, which I think is very important. So make sure you guys check us out again on our YouTube channel, the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Those two podcasts is already there, and we're already producing two other podcasts to come soon with some other podcasts to come after that. So make sure you guys stay tuned to our podcast. Also, I'm going to tell you guys how you can win $100 from the podcast, but you got to stay until the end in order to get that information. So we're going to jump right in it today. Just like any other day, we are blessed with some guests. Usually it's one guest, but we got two today. We are blessed with the Stockhams. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
We're doing well. I think we are in the right spot.
I believe you are. First of all, let me say thank you guys so very much for being on, because you could have been doing anything else, but you took out time to be here with me and my listeners, and I definitely want to let you know I appreciate it. So we're going to jump right in. So do me a favor, introduce yourselves to my audience and tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, so I'll start out, and then my wife can chime in to kind of fill in the blanks. So we're Casper and Cheryl Stockham, and we've been married for 21 years. And about 15 years ago, we decided to start helping couples with their relationships because ours was going well. But prior to my wife and I being married, Ernest, I was in the situation that you talked about earlier before we came on the show, I had been through several bad relationships and bad marriages. So I was in a bad spot 21 years ago, and I was crying out to God, saying, "Look, I had no idea about um, how to do this relationship game. Right? I'm failing at it miserably." And I was crying out to God, and I said, "If she's out there, please point her out to me, because I'm not doing well at picking them." And then and Cheryl came to my mind, and I reached out to her, and make a long story short, she agreed to marry me, and that was 21 years ago.
Awesome, awesome. Miss Cheryl, how are you today?
Doing fantastic.
All right, all right. You want to add anything to that story? I'm sure he left out some juicy parts.
Well, one of the things is that we just recently, like last August, we released our first book, Divorce Proofing Your Marriage. And it is a book to help couples in their relationships and their marriages to be strong and healthy. And we also launched a program that we call MVP, which is the most valuable partner. Be the most valuable partner in your marriage and your relationship. So we have trainings for our MVPs. We have an MVP huddle that's free. And then we have an MVP club for all the members where they can get training, and we have a community. We just believe marriages should be strong and healthy. We don't believe people should be married and miserable.
Right.
Our tagline is, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Right. Right. Yeah. So first of all, excuse me. I am a person. I was raised in a 2-parent household, right, with my mom and dad, and my 8 siblings. There's 9 of us.
Wow. Amen.
So also coming from a family of generational 2-parent households, right? And so the reason why I mentioned that is because my whole journey, and I won't go into the whole thing for my listeners because they've heard it enough times, but my whole journey of how I even got into podcasting was I was having some issues in my second marriage. And what I realized a big part of it was because our differences in upbringing.
Yes.
She was she was raised in a single mother household, as was her mother and her grandmother. So they had generations of single mothers, and then I come from a family of generations of married families,
Right.
And so with us coming together, of course, there was some dynamics that was like, all right, we needed to work out, as well as some other things but that played a big part in it. And so in my journey of realizing that, I came to the realization, as I sat down and thought about it, that every woman I've ever dated was a fatherless daughter. And so I started a page on Instagram called Friends to Fatherless Daughters. And I was just talking to basically the fatherless daughters from my perspective and as a father, because I have one biological child, which is my daughter. And so that was kind of how my journey started, because people start asking me to be on their podcast. And then long story short, here we are. So so marriage plays a big part to me because of the example that was set for me, right, with my mom and dad. And it was just always something that I wanted. And unfortunately, like you guys mentioned that, you've been married for 21 years. And I'm like, well, I was married for 20 years if you put both of my marriages together, right? But unfortunately, there was some things in the middle. And I even shared with you guys because I was thinking about it, because I knew we would be here to have this conversation. And I was like, well, if I really looked at it, what could I see that part was some of the biggest problems within both marriages that played a part in the ending? And I came up with unmet expectations, for one. I also think a lack of communication, played a part, and then unhealed traumas. So those 3 things definitely showed itself up in both marriages in different ways, but definitely showed their heads. And so, as always, I go before I have any guests on. I go to you guys YouTube channels and Instagrams and all that, and start, kind of do a little research on you guys. And you guys were talking about the book, so I really want to get into that. Talking about the book, and even have your experiences with, as you've been since you wrote the book, and then as you guys started, the whole movement that you guys have, including your podcast, because you have the podcast now also, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, and so I was going, kind of watching your videos, and you was talking about the book and all the chapters that's in the book, and I'm like, y'all are all in my business. Right? Y'all, I should have had, y'all should have wrote that book like a couple years ago. Maybe I'd still be married.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
so I want to talk about the book, and one of the things that I heard you guys talk about, even with the book, excuse me, that I'm very glad about, and I can appreciate, is that even though the book is called Divorce Proofing Your Marriage, you guys actually address, even before the marriage, with things to do and work on while you're single, which I think is amazing, because I remember hearing a pastor say, people were coming to him for marriage counseling, but you already set the marriage date. You know what I mean? So your mind is already made up. So you're used to going to counseling, right? And so I think that's very important, that to even have a section to start with. Okay, consider this while you're still single. So let's talk about the book a little bit. How you guys even came up with the idea, like, I think we should write a book, and then we just jump on in and just go through the chapters.
Well, you covered a lot in that. In your comments, we have been doing workshops for years and years, helping couples and even singles, right? So we're doing these workshops across the state of Colorado. And those topics that you mentioned are all things that we cover in the workshop, because the expectations, the communication aspects of it, growing up in different households like you're talking about, we cover all those, because those are some of those key issues, right? And in our book, Divorce Proofing Your Marriage, the first chapter is really a chapter written for singles, because we have some keys in there. We call them 7 keys to a healthy relationship, and the smart love. And we talk about the things people should be paying attention to before they get married, to make sure that they are in alignment and that it's a good match. Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna be really selfish, right, in this whole interview. I'm gonna be really selfish and just kind of deal through some of my issues, right?
Sure.
So one of the things that, like I mentioned about me in one of my marriages, was the unmet expectations, right? And so even in my second marriage, I only have one biological child, which is my daughter, but my second marriage, it was a blended family, right? And so I have 4 stepsons. We're still good family today, even though we're divorced. My wife, ex-wife, should I say, and I are still very good friends. We've been friends our whole life, even before we got married. So that's a whole nother story. We got that conversation on y'all podcast, right? that's a whole nother thing. But I know that one of the things that we faced was unmet expectations. And so I mentioned about her coming from a fatherless household. And so even when, after we got married, my relationship with her sons, or with our sons, was different than what she expected it to be. Because and I always say, a lot of times we draw our experiences or our ideas from things that we're exposed to, things that we see. And so for her, the things that she was exposed to, as for what a father should be, was like things on TV, like like watching the Cosby Show or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So she was expecting these different things that I was like, yeah, that's not realistic. Like it works that way sometimes, but not always. And she, like, one of the things we kind of had a conversation about was like playing sports with the kids, right? So I did play basketball with them a little bit, every now and then and stuff. But she was like, y'all should be like throwing a ball, like playing catch and all that, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's a part of it, but that's the end part of what it takes, I mean, what the relationship be about, so I came in with a lot of structure and responsibility, because I think the oldest, our oldest son was already 10 or 12, I think, when I came into the
Yeah.
picture, so I'm like, well, they need structure, they need, all of this thing. And so there was kind of a back and forth even with that,
Sure.
so if you can talk to a little bit about, addressing those unmet expectations from whoever side it could
Mhm.
come from, because I'm sure, even when and us having conversations even after we've been divorced, having conversations about things that she probably felt that I expected from her, and it was like to live up to a standard that I had. And even
Mhm.
though I never verbally said it,
Mhm.
she felt like I had a standard that I expected her to meet, and so just those again, even a lack of communication, so help me out. Right?
Well,
Yeah.
Ernest, you're right. There is a chapter, and we do workshops, and we talk about expectations. And my whole passion in the whole relationship game is that these things should be done before you get married.
Mhm.
And you even talk about in your podcast, you talk about being healed.
Mhm.
And these are things you should do before you even get into a relationship. So we talk to our singles about expectations, because expectations can be, they're unaware. The person's unaware that you even have expectations. Their expectations, they're not even mentioned. You just
Mhm.
assume there are
Right.
those expectations. And then there's expectations like, are your expectations realistic? Can someone really live up to that? So expectations is a big part, and that's why they should be communicated. But if a couple can't communicate, then it's difficult for them to express what their expectations are. And um, so we talk about that in our book, that basically you need to learn how to communicate. You need to learn how to sit down and talk to this person. And we also, in our workshops, we say, don't wait until you become so entangled in the
Mhm.
relationship that now it's almost too late to talk about it. It's never too late, but you're deep into it now.
Right.
These are conversations you need to have the moment you all start meeting each other. The moment you meet and you're going out, and you should start having. We advocate for having the tough questions and those tough conversations right up front.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you're already married, there is hope for those folks that are already married
Right.
and struggling with that, because you're talking about two people from different cultures or backgrounds or family upbringing, but you're talking about two adults.
Right.
Mhm.
So as long as you guys can communicate effectively, you can work through those issues,
Mm-hmm.
because typically it's not even the surface issue that's the problem. There's something else
Right.
going on that we need to get to,
Mm-hmm.
figure that out,
Mm-hmm.
and then things just start to flow better, right? But those things take some time. Sometimes they take time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something we can work out in a 30-minute conversation. Sometimes it's going to take several counseling sessions, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of figure that out. But in other times, Cheryl and I talk to couples often, and sometimes it's just a question of them not listening to each other. They're kind of talking over each other
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to listening. So we'll listen to both sides, and then we're like, okay, you guys realize that you're not listening to each other, because he said something that really uh, uh, um, is something you should appreciate, and she said something that you should appreciate, but neither one of you heard it. We heard it because we're listening to both you guys,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just something that we have to work through, but it's easily done. And we have, um, as you mentioned, we have chapters in our book kind of talking about it. We do live trainings uh, twice twice a month talking about it. We have a podcast show where we talk about it, and we have questions that come in, that we address and so forth. So there is help out there. Most of it is free, but there's also things that people can, can purchase from us.
Yeah.
What I would say the main thing is that regardless of whether you're married or single, you have to be willing to work at it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have couples that come to us and like you said earlier, they've already made up their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you want us to do? You've already decided you're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just here
Yeah.
for appearance sake, So as long as you are willing to sit down and listen to each other, put in the time and the effort that it takes, then your marriage can change. It will shift. It will have a whole new paradigm, but you have to be willing to work with it. And you have to be willing. Here's another key: you have to be willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times couples come to us for coaching, there's a lot of, as they say, water under the bridge.
Yeah.
And so you have got to be willing to forgive. You've got to be willing to give each other a clean slate.
Yeah.
You got to say, okay, that was the past. We said things, we did things. Let's ask for forgiveness. Ask God to forgive us. Let's forgive each other. And let's see what we can do to come up with a clean slate. But you got to really want your marriage to work and be willing to work at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of read my mind because that was exactly where I was going to go with it. It's like you gotta both have to want it to work.
Right.
It can't be one or the other. And I think even in my marriages, at some point in time that was a issue also because it was like what. When I'm ready to work, then the other person wasn't ready to work, and then when they're ready to work, by then I'm like, no, I'm out. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
not even really sitting, like you said, having a conversation and coming together and say, okay, are we both ready to work for this thing now?
Mhm.
And not just, okay, I'm gonna let you work and I'm gonna cruise, and then when by the time you figure out, okay, now it's something that you want to work on, now the
Mhm.
other person has checked out because they've been working all the time. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
and also you mentioned about not listening to each other. I have two friends of mine that they have a on and off relationship for years now, and I'm like, I don't even know why y'all still be messing around with each other. But but I remember going to their house one day, and the guy was talking to me, and he's like, man, she's this and this and this and this, and he goes off this whole tangent, and then he leaves out and goes wherever he went, and then she comes in. So then
Mhm.
she starts with the same thing, and he this and this and this, and I'm sitting there looking at both of them because we end up going to the store together, the three of
Yeah.
us in the car together, and I'm like, both of you guys came to me separately, and both of you guys are saying the same thing about each other.
Right.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
exact same thing. I'm like, either y'all too much alike, or you both of you guys like to irritate each other, but then get mad when you get irritated.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm like, that's your fault,
Yeah.
right? So it goes back to that listening or not listening,
Mhm.
or listening to respond and not really listening to understand,
Correct.
Right.
and I think
Right.
that's a big thing in relationships,
That's
that
exactly.
miscommunication.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit because you mentioned about the book starting with singles and
Mhm.
having these 7 steps
Mhm.
that we need to start with. So let's kind of go through the 7 steps a little bit just to give our listeners understanding of what they can expect,
Sure.
from the book and from the podcast.
Sure. Sure.
Well, they're called the 7 keys to a healthy relationship. And I'm just going to go through them briefly, and then we can kind of backtrack and
Mm-hmm.
expound on them. So the first one is seek a good match. Pay attention to your values and their values. Choose a real partner, not a makeover project. Don't try to change yourself to be someone else. Expect good communication. Don't play games or manipulate people. And have a bottom line.
Okay, okay. So first of all, where I want to start at, since I'm, I want to start at the I think you said, what was the first one? Seek a good
Take a
match.
good match. Yeah.
Mhm.
Seek a good match
Yeah.
because that one always stands up to me because I'm a PK, right? So
Mhm.
raised in the church, growing up in the
Mhm.
church, you often hear a man who findeth the wife findeth a good thing,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then I always say, because I've had these relationship conversations my whole life pretty
Right.
much, right? And but one of the things that I find, and I remember even speaking on it one day, is, to some of our women, it's like you have to be seen, right? So it's
Mhm.
seeking, you should find. You should have to be found. You shouldn't be the one looking,
Right.
right?
Right.
You shouldn't be the one seeking,
Right.
right? And then you goes on going on to, like you guys mentioned in your book about, finding a project. That's because you were seeking instead of being found. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
wanna you wanna be found, or should I say, you're tired of waiting to be found.
Right.
But then you go out and you start seeking, and you get these projects that you
Yeah.
trying to build
That's
them
it.
in, as they say.
Exactly. Exactly. It's instead of asking God to, to bring that person and you together, right? And it being a good match from God's perspective, not from our
Mhm.
perspective, because that's what happened with me, right? I was out there seeking, but I was just seeking makeover projects instead of
Right.
seeking a godly woman that was just had all her stuff together before I showed up, right? And that's what seeking a good match means. So if you're into if you are a spiritual person and you go to the club and you meet somebody in the club, they may or may not be a spiritual person, probably not. So that's not a good
Mhm.
match, right?
Right.
So you should be not looking, but you should be seen, as you said, in areas to where the person you're looking for is going to be there, like it may be at
Right.
church or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere outside of the club,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Um, you also want to look for someone that has a similar education background as you have, right? Um, Someone that has the same life experiences that you have. All these things are important. Like you just mentioned, right? Some of the challenges in your prior marriage was she came from one type of household and you came from another. Cheryl and I both grew up in two-parent homes, so we had that in common, and we have so much in common. When we met on our first date, and we went to the movies, and after that, we talked for like 3 hours, and we had so much in common. I actually knew after that one date that she was my wife. Now she didn't realize that.
Right.
She's like, "Oh, I'm
and,
glad
and
that's
I'm,
over
I'm
with."
sure you didn't tell her. I'm sure you didn't tell her that either, because she would start running right away. Like, oh no.
Well,
I think I was watching something. I think it was a podcast or something I was watching recently, and the guy was saying, he walked up to this lady and was like, "God told me you're my wife," and
mhm,
she was like, "Okay,"
mhm. Yeah,
and as you know, that ended in divorce.
yeah, yeah,
But it was
yeah,
like, yeah, you walk up to me and say, "God told you that I'm your husband, or you're my wife." It's like, okay, why he didn't tell me? Because
right.
Right.
clearly there's some miscommunication going on.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, for sure.
But I want to go to something that you said, Casper, because you mentioned about in your journey that you were looking for these different people, and I think one of the things, if I'm not probably am paraphrasing, that you didn't really know yourself. And I think that that's a problem too, of why sometimes our pickers is wrong, because we don't know ourselves to even know what we need, let alone what we want in a partner.
Right.
Because sometimes what we want or what we think we want in a partner is not what we need. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
Right,
saying? And so I
right.
think there should be a time of you getting to know yourself and understand what you want in a marriage, in a person, in a mate, even in a relationship. But it starts with your relationship with yourself first,
Correct.
That's correct.
before you can be in a healthy relationship with someone else. And I
Yeah.
know that even after my divorce, I got into some personal development, and things of that nature, and
Mhm.
I've gotten to know myself more in the last 3 years than in my whole 47 years
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
am. Right. And so if you could speak to that a little bit, because I know you guys talked about being yourself as one of the 7 keys. Just
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit, because I'm sure that plays like I said, a major part in the relationship with someone else, is having a good relationship with yourself first.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I felt like I knew who I was, but I fell into the trap of the makeover project. To where I was okay with someone not being at my level because I was going to bring them up. I was going
Hmm.
to clean them up, dress them up, work them up, and they were going to be, someone who I could look up to, and that never happened. right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we'd have the friction between us because I'm like, why don't you do this or do that? And that's not who they were, right? So I wanted them to be someone who they weren't, because it was a makeover project as opposed to a partner who completed me. It was a partner who drained on me, and not that they were bad people, right?
Mhm.
They weren't bad people. They just weren't. It wasn't a good match, right?
Right.
I didn't seek a good match. I sought someone that was not really compatible with me. And another challenge, and this happens a lot in relationships. All my past relationships, we started with the physical first, and then I found out later that we weren't really compatible in
Right.
other areas, right?
Right.
But but when Cheryl and I met and started dating, she was very clear to me. She had a bottom line, and the bottom line was there would be no physical relationship until we got married. And
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, okay. I'm not sure
Right.
how that works.
Yeah. 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 And
But
I was going. I'm sorry, but I was going to mention that, Cheryl, because I wanted to hear a little bit from your point of view, right? Because I definitely wanted to talk about the having the boundaries, that you
Mm-hmm.
set for yourself, and even getting to know your own values. And so, while Castor was finding himself in these matches, you already kind of made up your mind, like, you know what, this is what I'm standing on here moving forward. And so, like you said, when you guys met, that was a conversation that you guys had. So from your point of view, how was that? First of all, how was that you even came to that realization on your own, like, okay, this is where how I'm moving? And then how was that conversation even with him after you guys met? And from your point of view, how did that even, I'm sure of course it ended well, okay, 21 years later. But even in the beginning, I'm sure there was some tests and some trials.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, and I also want to go back to, I want to kind of intertwine both of them because you talked about seeking and women seeking men
Right.
as opposed to being sought. I
Mhm.
wanted to touch on that because you mentioned something about being seen so that you can, so they can see you. But
Mhm.
there's a way that a woman should carry herself. Being seen means you're not necessarily all flamboyant. Being seen means you don't expose all of your body parts so that they can see you.
Right.
I mean, we think that that's what men want, and that does attract them, but that's not what they really want in a true woman.
right.
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10,
In a wife, yeah.
that's not what they want for a wife. That's not what they want for a woman who's going to be their business partner, their mother of their children, who's going to stick with them through thick and thin. Your body parts ain't going to help. So you
Right.
need to be a little deeper than that. And the other thing I wanted to point that especially if you're a woman of faith, your focus is on the King. You're here to serve Jesus. Jesus is your Lord and Savior. And so you're focused on kingdom business. And when your husband finds you, he will find you doing kingdom business
Mhm.
Right.
genuinely and sincerely, not to impress and not to get anybody's attention.
Mhm.
Your heart is really for the kingdom of God, and you're busy doing that. And when he finds you doing that, and you begin to um there's you exude a
Mhm.
certain persona, a certain character, a certain personality.
Mhm.
And from that, he can decide that's a woman I want to introduce
Yeah.
myself to. That's a woman I want to meet.
Yeah.
And so you want to be that woman. I at the time, well, even before Casper came along, all of my friends at the time were married. We were all in the church,
Mhm.
working in the church. They were married and miserable. Their relationships were just wrecked. I mean, there was infidelity, there was all kinds of stuff going on that was totally the opposite of what they really wanted. And I watched that. I observed that. I was quite content. I was in bliss in my singleness.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to trade that in to be miserable.
Right.
So I'm like, God, First of all, I'm not looking for a husband. I don't want a husband. I'm fine being single. I enjoy being by myself. I'm having the time of my life. You know, my prayer for the Lord was just send me some money. I
Right.
don't need a man. I'm not looking for a man. Just send me some money. And I but then the Holy Spirit began to really work on me and take me to the a level where I began to realize that marriage was more than that. There's a lot more to it. It was about having that relationship with the Lord. It was about working in the kingdom together, and that God had a purpose for a man and a woman. And it wasn't all the things that I thought it was. So I was blessed that God had placed me in the arena with a godly, mature woman. She was an older woman, and she kind of gathered all those little single women, like little mother hen and little chicks, and she gathered us and set us at our feet, and she began to teach us, and she began to train us and share what it meant to be a woman, what it meant to be a child of God, what it meant to one day have a husband and a family, and how that all looked and what it was supposed to be like, and that God had a plan and a purpose for marriage, which was totally different than what we thought it was.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed and fortunate to have that training and that teaching and that upbringing. And she just kind of, and we went through healing too. I mean, we would meet at her house every week for Bible study, and we went through healing all of our past junk and trauma and things that we had endured, um, poor misconceptions that we had about men, about women, about ourselves. And so I went through years of training without even realizing that I was being trained. And so when Casper came along, no, I was not lowering my standard. You know, I'm like, it was one of those things where I've worked too long and hard. I am not giving up. I don't want to be in a messed up relationship. I saw my friends, they were miserable. And I was like, oh God, that is not what I want. Yeah. I am not signing up for. I told him I'd just stay single. Forget it. But he later showed me that he had a plan. And it went beyond just a man and a woman looking at each other and being all googly eyed. It went beyond the physical, you know, and it was about the kingdom. And so here we are. And we realize now that marriages can work.
Yeah.
And God wants his marriages to work. It's sad, Ernest, that the marriages, that the divorce rate in the church is equal to that in the world.
Yeah.
We have got we got to make that shift. That's got to change.
Yeah, and I think we're not talking about it enough. So I'm 47, right? And so I remember growing up in the church, and when we talked about marriage or even sex before marriage, it was like that was the whole thing. Like, okay, don't commit fornication. So in order to not commit fornication, let's get married. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it was a huge emphasis on that part, but not actually the marriage itself. Like there was no marriage training. There was no single training. You know, it was like, don't commit fornication. And if you think you're going to, get married first. And that was like the whole plan.
Right.
You know, like, all right, so now we're married. Now what? You know what I mean? Now we got the physical part taken care of. Now what about the rest of it? And I think that's where in the church, at least, you know, in my experience growing up, where there's been a disconnect. You know, definitely over the years, there's been a lot of, you know, new developments and more teachings and singleness and things like that within the church. But definitely growing up in my my perspective, it was like, don't commit fornication, get married instead. You know what I mean? And that was like the end of it. You know, there was no marriage counseling, there was no marriage group or outings, and you know, it just wasn't there. And so again, we find ourselves, even though we are the church, we find ourselves having just as much of a hard time of those outside of the
Sure.
church.
That's
Even
right.
though we have a book with the principles in it,
Right.
we got the manuscript, you know
Right.
what I mean. But we just not teaching the class, and so yeah. So, but I want to go back to something that you said real quick though. You mentioned about women being uh, scantily dressed,
Mhm.
and that may attract a man, but it's not necessarily going to keep him,
Right.
and I remember I was a guest on the show, and so I talk a lot about fatherless daughters. And so
Mhm.
I was guest on the show. We're talking about fatherless daughters, and one of the ladies who were one of the hosts was a fatherless daughter because her dad had passed away.
Mm.
And so she mentioned about a incident that happened with her and one of her male friends. They had went out to lunch, and they was out to lunch sitting at like an outside patio. And so this girl is coming walking by, and she sees her, and she's like loosely dressed, like
Mhm.
she's from her description, like she barely had anything on,
Yeah.
right? And so she looks at her guy friend because she's saying to herself, when she gets up here, and he's going to be like checking her out or whatever. And so she's watching him to watch his expression when she walks past.
Sure.
And so when the girl walks past, he turns and he looked at her, and then he looks back at his friend, and he says to her, she must not have no daddy.
Mm.
And she was like, that moment, and I think she was like a teenager when this happened. Of course, she's an adult
Yeah.
now. She said, but that moment stayed in her mind so much. She said, I don't want, because her dad died when she was 6.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
she was like, I don't want anyone to ever look at me and be able to tell that my dad is not in my life. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so
Mhm.
even that definitely makes a difference. And I think that of course plays a part too in outside of society and media, social media and all that stuff, but the lack of the fathers in the home, or
Right.
not
Yeah.
necessarily in the home, but in the lives of our daughters,
Sure.
Right.
plays
Or
a
a
huge
father
part
figure.
of why,
Yeah.
right, plays a
Mhm.
huge part of why we're having some of the problems that we have,
No
and which
doubt.
was even one of the reasons why I started the Girl Dad Discussions podcast,
Right.
Mhm.
is to combat the narrative of the absent father and fatherless daughter, because I'm like, there are guys, fathers like myself, that is
Mhm.
very active in the lives of our daughters, and so
Mhm.
I wanted to amplify those voices to the world, and so I started that podcast. So another thing I want to get up before we get out of here, because I don't want to take up all you guys' time, but it was something else that you mentioned that I think is very important, that we hit on, and you mentioned that. When you and Casper started talking, you realized that he had a plan and a purpose. And I know that's one of the things that you guys address, is having a purpose and a plan for your marriage. And so talk to us a little bit about that before we get out of here.
Well, one of the things was, at the time that I met Casper, I was being groomed in ministry. And so I had a path that I believe the Lord wanted me to take.
Mhm.
And I did not want to get off that path. I wanted to stay there. So it was important for me that whomever the man was I was going to be with, that he understood that. And I know Casper, we talked a lot.
Mhm.
I threw at him every scenario I could think of, from A to Z. He said I was interrogating him.
Yes, for sure.
But I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. And even right up to like a week before we got married, I was still be like, do you understand? I had been ministering, and I speaking, and I shared a tape with him and said, this is who I am. This is who God is grooming me to be. How do you see that? And so we talked a lot, and we came up with, we were big on having a plan, what we wanted in our marriage, in our relationship. Casper, like he said, he'd had failed once, and his number one plan was he didn't want another failed
Don't
one.
want another. I'm done with that.
So we weren't afraid. I think the biggest thing, Ernest, probably is that we weren't afraid to talk.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And we were mature when we got married. We
Yes.
were in our early 40s when we got married. So we had kind of already been through a lot of the drama and all the
Mhm.
stuff. So we knew what to expect. So we talked a lot. I have 3 daughters and 3 granddaughters. So I can relate to your conversation about the daughters, and I can and I intentionally say stuff to them to see or to get the response, thinking that, do you think I'd be proud of you doing that? Like one time, one of my daughters was dancing somewhere, and I heard about it, right? And I knew the kind of dancing she was doing, but I didn't let her know that. So I called her up one day and said, "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, I'm doing. It's going okay." I said, "So what are you doing these days?" She said, "Well, I'm dancing." I said, "What kind of dancing are you doing?" She said, "Just you know." She was kind of him. She was dancing around the fact that she was
Right. Yeah.
dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 weeks later, she had quit that, right, because of the daddy daughter connection, like you're talking about,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, that's it's critical, and you're right. A guy sees a scantily clad woman walking down the street, he's going to see it, but he's not going to be saying that's my wife. He's going to be saying, that's something I need to go after, but not for her to be my wife and raise my children and everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one more thing before we get out of here, and I'm gonna let you guys go. Uh, um, Cheryl, I was listening to you talk, and you were talking about, um, you are already being groomed in ministry. You already had your path, right? And so I was listening to a clip of the late great Dr. Miles Monroe.
Mhm.
We love him.
Love him.
So, yes. And so he would in this it was a short clip from one of his sermons, but he talks about, he said there's the word die, which is di, and that suffix prefix means two, right?
Mhm.
So it means two, and then you have the word vision, right,
Mhm.
which is you have a vision. So but when we're talking about a relationship and you put die, which is two
Mhm.
visions together, it
Mhm.
comes together is division, right?
Right.
Which divides, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So Cheryl, even having your own vision already, and I think this is important because oftentimes we hear, okay, when a man and a woman gets together, the woman should submit, her
Mhm.
vision to the vision of the husband. And in some cases, I do believe that's true. But I also believe when you already have a calling and a
Mhm.
purpose, and you know what your calling and your purpose is, that it's not the giving up of your vision or
No.
the giving up of your purpose, but it
Mhm.
should be a mixture of the two and a coming together in a
Yes.
Mhm.
way that both of the purposes becomes one. So
Right.
now that vision is not two visions, but it's one
One
vision because
vision.
it's a
Yes.
combined vision.
Yeah.
So touch just to give us a little bit, uh, in you guys' own words of how you guys work that out to bring these visions together to now having one vision that definitely has lasted over 20 something years now, to the point that now you're teaching other people from that same vision.
Right.
Well, what it was for us, my vision on this, how I saw it or see it, is that even though I knew I was being groomed for ministry, and Casper and I had a lot in common. For instance, he was used to speaking in front of large groups and doing network marketing. I was used to speaking in front of groups in the church. But what it was is that God, over these past 20 years, has slowly taken us both through a process and training and development to mold us together
Right.
as one.
Right.
It didn't just happen overnight.
Mhm.
And so there were times where it seemed like I wasn't ever going to do or fulfill the vision that I thought God had given me. But all along, God was working on Casper. He was working on me. And he was, I would say, shedding things off of us both
Mhm.
in order to meld us together into
Mhm.
that one vision, which, by the way, is his vision.
Right.
It really isn't the vision we have is his.
Mhm.
And so he was constantly shaping us and molding us, and um, like an onion, he was just peeling off layers off of each of us just to bring us together for that one vision. And it took time. It's taken these 20 years. There have been some times where we thought, oh, it's not going to happen. We're like, God, why are we here? What are we doing? There's ups and downs and twists and turns, and there pain and just disillusionment and discouragement and disappointment.
Yeah.
But we hung in there.
Yeah.
We didn't let it tear us apart.
Right. And during all those times, it wasn't that we were not happily married. It was that we had these two visions going on, these two visions that were competing with each other, because both of us are out there, right? She's out there in the church and I'm out there in business, right? So now we've been able to mold those and bring them together to where we have this I Am Love Builders vision that is part church and part vision, right? The I Am and I Am Love Builders is a great I Am, right? So we are still now actually walking in a God-driven purpose, combining the church aspect and the business aspect. And that's when really things started to grow. We launched our book. We've got podcasts going on. We got a TV show. Now we're doing a casting call for that should be filming in August, on the 15th and 16th of August. So things are moving forward now at a rapid pace because we've been able to bring those two visions together.
But you have to be willing to hang in there. See, a lot of people, they won't hang in there.
Right.
They allow the enemy to bring division, and they don't stick and stay and see what the end result is, because sometimes it's God who's doing things.
Right.
There are things that needed to be layered or shredded off of me, in order to fulfill God's ultimate vision and plan that he has for both of us in his kingdom. For us to be a ministry to other people, to help them, to encourage them, to love on them. Some things take time. It just didn't happen overnight. And so through these 20 years, we just stuck and we hung in there, and mainly because of our faith. We just believed, even though we didn't understand why we were going through. We didn't see it. We didn't understand why we were going through what we were going through, how painful it was, how uncomfortable it was. But we believed God. We somehow he was doing something.
It was like the Israelites in the desert, right? We're in the desert. We're saying, and he's talking about the promised land. We're like, where is it? Is it showing anytime today? Would be really good for that promised land to show up. We're ready to go across, right?
Right. Awesome. So first of all, let me say thank you guys so very much for being on, for sharing your expertise and your story. I definitely enjoyed it, and I know that my audience, excuse me, I know that my audience definitely got something from it. I know I did. Right. I told I was going to be very selfish this interview. So I know I've learned some things. So I want you guys to have the last word, and I want you guys to leave us with a word of advice or inspiration, however you feel. Leave my audience with something that they can take away, and also leave us with your social media handles and things of that nature, and tell us exactly where we can get the book and things like that. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to think about that. To my listeners, first of all, thank you guys for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are checking us out on our websites. Again, our main website, the Deal Heal fulfill.org website, is our overall business website, where you can find out more about me, the podcast that I got going, workshops, all the things that I got going on. You can go there and even go there in order to find out how to contact me for actually info at dealhealfulfill.org to have me come out to be a speaker or to facilitate a workshop for you guys. Also check out our inspirational t-shirt line at deal2healtees.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. So you can go there, Deal2Heal Tees, and check out our inspirational t-shirt line. And also you can check out our ebooks at ebooksbyejames.com. Ebooksbyejames.com is where all of my ebooks are. We talked a little bit about the fact that I work with fatherless daughters and talk a lot about fatherless daughters. One of my ebooks that I wrote is called The Four Core, which is the four core values that every daughter should get from her father. You can find that ebook there again at ebooksbyejames.com, as well as some other things that you can find there. So make sure you guys are checking us out on our websites. Also, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization the last couple years, last 2 or 3 years, organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And one of the things that we do is we hold free virtual workshops every quarter of the year. And we talk about forgiveness, everything that has to do with forgiveness, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, even what forgiveness is, because I don't think everybody really understand the gift that forgiveness is, and that's a gift that you give yourself, not necessarily someone else. But we talk about everything forgiveness. So whenever you're listening to this, either a workshop just ended or is one coming up, you can go to forgivenessmission.com. Again, that's forgivenessmission.com, or go to Eventbrite to register. Just look up Forgiveness Workshop hosted by the Forgiveness Mission, and you guys can go there and check that out. Last but not least, I told you guys that I would tell you how you can win $100 from the podcast. You can win $100 from the podcast by joining or entering, should I say, our $100 super subscriber contest. So what does you have to do? You have to first subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Facebook page, and to our podcast on Spotify. After you've done those three things, text the word WIN, WIN, to the number 866-326-0730 to qualify to win $100. The contest is random and it's ongoing, which means once you're in, you can always win. You don't ever have to re-up. Just make sure that when you text the word WIN, WIN, to the number 866-326-0730, that you also leave your contact information, your name, your phone number, and your email address, so that we can contact you if you are our winner. We have a lot of people that's texting the word win, but you don't leave no information, so we can't contact you if you are our winner. So again, you can win $100 from the podcast by entering our super subscriber contest. Mr. Casper and Miss Cheryl, again, thank you guys so very much for being on. I really appreciate you guys. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Yes. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Our mission is just to end divorce in the body of Christ for sure, and even in the world. So we have a lot of information that people can get from our website. The first 5 chapters of our book are in an ebook that's free from our website. All they have to do is go to iamlovebuilders.com. This iamlovebuilders.com, and they can download our free ebook. We have love assessments they can take from our website. They're 5-minute and 20-minute love assessments from our website. They can register for our free trainings that we do twice a month on social media. We have a Facebook Live site. We also have a public Facebook group, but we also have an MVP group. That's what our shirt's MVP, Most Valuable Partner, and that's a subscription-based program. But this is where we have group discussions, live group discussions with our members. And if you really want to become the MVP, the most valuable partner in your relationship, you can take advantage of our MVP program. So we're just excited to be out there. And our TV show, which is Winning with Love, is the name of our TV show. It's going to be available in over 350 million homes by the end of this year. So we're excited about that as well.
And our book, you can get it on Amazon. Divorce Proofing Your Marriage.
Yes.
You can go to Amazon and get your copy today.
All right. So you guys want to leave us with a word of advice for our couples?
I would like to say a word of encouragement. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't give in. And learn how to forgive. Whatever has happened in your relationship up to this point, check with the Holy Spirit. If This is something God has put together. Don't pull it apart, because he has a plan for it that's far beyond what you think or what you imagined or what your expectations are. And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But you got to hang in there.
Yeah.
And if you need help, there are plenty of places you can go, and we're one of them.
Yeah. And if you're not having fun, just call us, because if you're not having fun,
you're not doing it right.
Right. All right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys for tuning in once again to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed.
Amen.
Hey guys, I know you're enjoying the podcast. However, don't forget to join our text line at 866-326-0730. That's 866-326-0730 in order to receive text messages with new events and things that is going on and new episodes as they release. All right, see you in a minute. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.